Commander Vex-9 clicked his mandibles in what could only be described as amusement. The recruitment hall of the Galactic Defense Academy buzzed with the nervous energy of fresh cadets, but his attention remained fixed on one particular file floating before his compound eyes. A human. Lieutenant Cora snorted from beside him, her scaled tail twitching with barely contained laughter. They actually sent us a human for advanced combat training. Vex-9's antennae twitched as he scrolled through the application. The photograph showed a young female with short auburn hair and determined green eyes. Her name was listed as Zara Holt, age 22, from the third planet of the Sol system. Apparently their military believes she has potential, Vex-9 said, his voice dripping with skepticism. Though I fail to see how a species that still uses chemical propulsion for space travel could produce anything remotely threatening in combat. The other instructors gathered around, their various appendages clicking, hissing and chirping with amusement. Captain Thorax, a massive Brutanian with stone-like skin and 4 arms, let out a rumbling laugh that shook the floor panels. Remember the last human they sent? Thorax wheezed between chuckles. What was his name? Marcus something. Spent 3 days in the medical bay after the first sparring session. Claimed his bones were broken. He made air quotes with 2 of his massive hands, as if having an internal skeleton wasn't ridiculous enough. This should be entertaining, muttered Instructor Sill, her serpentine body coiling with anticipation. I do so love watching these soft-bodied species realize they're completely out of their league. The transport shuttle arrived precisely at 0800 hours, standard galactic time. Through the viewing ports, the instructors watched as various alien cadets disembarked. Towering Cathari warriors with their razor-sharp claws, sleek Aquarian fighters with their bioluminescent combat suits, and hulking Gornak soldiers whose very presence seemed to bend the metal flooring. And then her. Zara Holt stepped off the shuttle with what could only be described as casual confidence. She wore the standard-issue training uniform, but somehow managed to make it look like she was walking into a coffee shop rather than the most elite military academy in 3 galaxies. Her small frame barely reached the chest plates of most other cadets, and her pale skin looked almost translucent under the harsh artificial lighting. "Oh, this is rich," Cora whispered, trying to suppress her laughter. "She looks like she could be snapped in half by a strong breeze." The human walked directly toward the instructor platform, seemingly oblivious to the stares and snickers from her fellow cadets. When she reached the group, she executed what appeared to be some sort of traditional human greeting gesture called a salute. "Cadet Zara Holt reporting for duty, sir," she said in that peculiar monotone voice humans used when trying to sound official. Vex-9 studied her for a long moment, his compound eyes taking in every detail. No visible armor plating, no natural weapons, no enhanced musculature, just soft, pink flesh wrapped around what he presumed was that bizarre internal skeleton structure humans were cursed with. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy, Cadet Holt," he said, his voice carrying just enough condescension to make his feelings clear. "I trust you understand that this is not some recreational facility from your homeworld. This is where we forge the galaxy's finest warriors." "I understand, sir," Zara replied, her green eyes meeting his compound ones without flinching. "I'm here to learn." Several of the alien cadets behind her burst into barely contained laughter. A particularly large Gornax named Brutus made a sound that roughly translated to "this should be fun to watch." "Very well," Vex-9 continued, gesturing toward the training complex with one of his 4 arms. "Your first evaluation will be with Instructor Thorax in the combat simulation chamber. Try not to break anything important." The laughter that followed this comment echoed through the corridor as the group moved toward the training facilities. The combat simulation chamber was a marvel of galactic engineering. Holographic projectors created realistic battle scenarios while gravitic manipulators could simulate the conditions of any known planet. The walls were lined with medical stations, a necessity given the intensity of the training. Instructor Thorax stood in the center of the chamber like a living mountain. His forearms were crossed over his massive chest, and his stone-like features were set in what might have been a grin on a less terrifying face. "Cadet Holt," he rumbled, his voice like grinding boulders. "Today's exercise is simple. Survive for 5 minutes against a combat drone programmed with basic attack patterns. Most cadets manage 2 minutes on their first attempt." Zara nodded, pulling her hair back into a simple ponytail. "What's the record, sir?" The question caught everyone off guard. Thorax's grin widened, revealing teeth that looked like they could crush steel. "Cadet Vash of the Cathari warrior caste managed 4 minutes and 37 seconds, he said. "Though I doubt that's relevant to your situation." "We'll see," Zara said simply. The combat drone materialized in a shimmer of light, its sleek form hovering 3 feet off the ground. Multiple weapon ports dotted its surface, and its sensors locked onto the human immediately. The drone was programmed to be challenging but not lethal, designed to test a cadet's reflexes, tactical thinking, and endurance. "Begin simulation," Thorax announced. The drone immediately launched forward, energy blasts streaking through the air where Zara had been standing. The human had already moved, rolling to the side with surprising grace for someone with such a primitive body structure. The gathered instructors watched with mild interest, expecting the usual panicked flailing they'd seen from other species during their first encounter with Galactic standard combat training. Instead, they witnessed something rather different. Zara moved like water. Where the drone's sensors predicted her to be, she wasn't. Where its weapons targeted, she had already vacated. She seemed to flow around the attacks with an almost casual ease that was both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. "Interesting," Vex 9 muttered, his antennae twitching with confusion. "Her reaction time appears to be adequate." The drone, frustrated by its inability to land a hit, increased its aggression level. Multiple energy beams crisscrossed the chamber, creating a deadly light show that would have reduced most cadets to smoking craters. Zara continued her deadly dance, occasionally using the chamber's obstacles for cover but mostly relying on movement that seemed to defy the laws of physics. 3 minutes passed, then 4. The laughter from the alien cadets had died completely. Even the instructors had stopped their casual commentary, watching in growing amazement as the small human continued to evade every attack with what appeared to be almost supernatural skill. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, Zara did something unexpected. Instead of continuing to dodge, she suddenly changed direction and charged straight at the drone. "What is she doing?" Cora hissed. "That's suicide." But it wasn't suicide. As the drone's weapons swiveled to track her frontal assault, Zara dropped into a slide that carried her directly underneath the hovering machine. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a loose piece of debris from the chamber floor and hurled it with precision that would have impressed a Cathari marksman. The debris struck the drone's primary sensor array, sparks flew, and the machine wobbled in its hover pattern, momentarily confused by the loss of its targeting system. Zara didn't waste the opportunity. She leapt upward with a vertical jump that seemed impossible for someone with her apparent muscle mass, grabbed the drone's lower housing, and used her body weight to bring it crashing to the chamber floor. The simulation ended with the drone's deactivation signal echoing through the chamber. 5 minutes and 17 seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye, compound or otherwise, was fixed on the small human who stood calmly in the center of the chamber, barely breathing hard despite having just broken the Academy's record. "Well," Thorax said finally, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. "That was unexpected." Zara dusted off her hands and looked up at the massive instructor. "What's next, sir?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The alien cadets who had been laughing at her arrival were now staring with expressions ranging from shock to something that might have been respect. The instructors were clearly struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Vex 9's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep thought among his species. This human had just accomplished something that should have been impossible for her kind. Either their intelligence about human capabilities was woefully inadequate, or this particular specimen was an extreme anomaly. "Cadet Holt," he said slowly, "report to the Physical Conditioning Center. Instructor Sill will oversee your strength evaluation." As they moved through the academy corridors, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The casual dismissal and open mockery had been replaced by wary curiosity. The word of the human's performance was already spreading through the cadet ranks, carried by whispered conversations in a dozen different languages. The Physical Conditioning Center was designed to test the raw strength and endurance of various galactic species. Massive weights that could challenge even Gornak's physiology sat alongside endurance machines calibrated for the most athletic species in known space. Instructor Sill, her serpentine form coiled around a monitoring station, watched as Zara approached the testing area. Her reptilian features showed none of the amusement that had been present earlier. "The strength evaluation is straightforward," Sill explained, her forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "Lift as much weight as you can manage. The current record for your approximate body mass category is held by a Zenturian cadet who managed 300 standard units." Zara examined the weight apparatus, running her hands along the grip bars with the careful attention of someone who understood mechanical systems. "These are calibrated for galactic standard gravity?" she asked. "Of course," Sill replied, slightly insulted by the implication that the Academy's equipment might be improperly calibrated. "And what's the gravity differential between this station and Earth standard?" The question gave Sill pause. She consulted her tablet, scrolling through environmental data with increasing confusion. "According to this, your homeworld operates at approximately 95% of galactic standard gravity," she said. "Hardly a significant difference." Zara nodded thoughtfully. "And you said the record is 300 units. "For your mass category, yes, though I suspect you'll find that somewhat challenging given your species' apparent physical limitations." The human stepped up to the weight apparatus and adjusted the settings. Instead of starting with a conservative weight to test her capabilities, she immediately set the machine to 300 units. Cadet Holt, thorax rumbled from his position near the observation area. "Perhaps you should start with something more manageable." "This is manageable," Zara replied calmly, positioning herself at the lifting station. She gripped the bars, took a deep breath, and lifted. The weights rose smoothly, as if they contained nothing more substantial than air. Zara held the position for the required 3 seconds, then lowered the weights with controlled precision. The measurement display showed 300 units lifted successfully. Without comment, she reset the machine to 400 units. The collective intake of breath from the watching aliens was audible. 400 standard units was well into Gornak's territory, a weight that should have been physically impossible for someone of Zara's apparent build. She lifted it anyway. 500 units followed, then 600. At 700 units, she finally showed signs of strain, her muscles tensing and her breathing becoming slightly labored. But she completed the lift successfully before stepping away from the apparatus. 700 standard units, Sill announced in a voice that sounded like she couldn't quite believe her own words. New Academy record in all weight categories. The gathered cadets were no longer laughing. Many of them were staring at Zara with expressions that bordered on fear. The small human from the primitive Sol system had just demonstrated physical capabilities that exceeded some of their greatest warriors. "How?" Vex 9 asked, his usual composure cracking slightly. "Your species files indicate average strength levels far below what we just witnessed." Zara shrugged, a gesture that seemed almost casual despite having just broken several galactic records. "Maybe your files are incomplete, sir." The rest of the day's evaluations followed a similar pattern. Combat reflexes, tactical analysis, endurance testing, spatial reasoning, weapons proficiency, in every single category. The human not only met expectations but exceeded them by margins that defied logical explanation. By evening, word had spread throughout the academy. The human who had arrived to mockery and laughter had systematically demolished every preconception about her species' capabilities. Cadets who had been planning to use her as entertainment were now wondering if they might actually learn something from her presence. In the instructor's lounge, the teaching staff gathered for their usual end-of-day debriefing. The mood was significantly different from the morning's casual confidence. "I've reviewed the performance data 3 times," Lieutenant Cora said, her scaled features showing deep confusion. "Either our testing equipment is malfunctioning, or we need to completely reassess our understanding of human physiology." "The equipment is functioning perfectly," Syl reported from her coiled position near the window. "I ran full diagnostics after her strength evaluation. Every system is operating within normal parameters." Thorax sat heavily in a chair designed to accommodate his massive frame. "In 30 years of training cadets from across the galaxy, I have never seen anything like what that human did today. The precision, the adaptability, the raw physical capabilities, it doesn't match any of our intelligence about her species." Vex 9 remained silent, reviewing the day's data on his personal tablet. The numbers were clear, undeniable, and completely contrary to everything the Galactic Defense Council believed about human capabilities. "Commander," Cora said hesitantly, "what if the humans have been deliberately underrepresenting their abilities?" The suggestion hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The idea that a species might actively deceive the galactic community about their capabilities was almost unthinkable. It violated every protocol of interspecies cooperation that had maintained peace for over 1,000 years. "That would be," Thorax began, then stopped, unable to finish the thought. "Impossible," Syl concluded. "No species would risk the consequences of such deception." But even as she said it, her voice lacked conviction. The evidence was literally sitting in their cadet barracks, probably reading or whatever it was humans did during their rest periods. "Tomorrow's evaluations include advanced combat scenarios," Vex 9 said finally. "Real combat against multiple opponents, both holographic and live training partners. If Cadet Holt continues to perform at today's levels..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood the implications. Dawn broke over the Academy with the kind of artificial precision that only advanced atmospheric processors could provide. In the cadet quarters, Zara Holt sat cross-legged on her regulation bunk, performing what appeared to be some sort of meditative ritual. Her breathing was controlled, rhythmic, almost hypnotic to observe. Across the dormitory, her fellow cadets watched with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. The casual dismissal of yesterday had been replaced by something far more complex. Respect, certainly, but also a growing unease that none of them were quite ready to voice. Brutus, the massive Gornax who had laughed loudest at her arrival, cleared his throat with a sound like grinding concrete. "Human," he rumbled in his broken galactic standard, "yesterday was impressive." Zara opened her eyes and smiled. It was a perfectly pleasant expression that somehow managed to be more unsettling than reassuring. "Thank you, Brutus. I'm looking forward to today's challenges." The way she said challenges made it sound like she was anticipating a particularly enjoyable game rather than advanced military training designed to push cadets to their absolute limits. In the instructor's preparation room, the morning briefing had taken on an entirely different tone from previous days. Commander Vex 9 stood before a holographic display showing the day's training scenarios, but his usual confidence had been replaced by something approaching caution. "Advanced combat scenarios, level 7, he announced to his assembled staff. "Multi-opponent engagements, environmental hazards, and live sparring with senior cadets." Instructor Syl's serpentine form shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, given yesterday's unexpected results, perhaps we should consider modifying the difficulty parameters." "Absolutely not," Thorax interjected, his stone-like features set in determined lines. "If this human is as capable as she appeared yesterday, then she should be able to handle standard level 7 scenarios. If she isn't," he let the implication hang, "and if she exceeds level 7 parameters?" Lieutenant Cora asked quietly. The question nobody wanted to ask had finally been voiced. What happened if their assumptions about human limitations were not just wrong, but catastrophically wrong? Then we escalate, Vex 9 said simply. The Galactic Defense Council needs accurate assessments of human capabilities, whatever those capabilities might be. The advanced combat arena was 3 times larger than the previous day's simulation chamber. Multiple levels, environmental hazards and variable gravity zones created a battlefield that could challenge even veteran soldiers. The observation deck was packed with instructors, senior cadets, and several academy administrators who had heard rumors about the previous day's events. Zara entered the arena with the same casual confidence she had displayed since arrival. She wore enhanced training armor now, standard protection gear that looked almost comically oversized on her small frame. The helmet barely fit her head, and the arm guards extended well past her wrists. Today's scenario is more complex, Thorax announced, his voice echoing through the arena's audio system. Multiple hostile contacts, changing environmental conditions, and 3 live opponents. Survival time for level 7 scenarios averages 8 minutes for experienced cadets. He gestured toward 3 figures entering from the opposite side of the arena. Senior Cadet Vash of the Cathari, whose razor-sharp claws had earned him recognition as one of the Academy's finest close combat specialists. Senior Cadet Mora, an Aquarian whose bioluminescent combat suit could bend light to create near invisibility. And Senior Cadet Thane, a Zentaurian whose 4 arms and enhanced reflexes made him a formidable opponent for anyone. Your objective is simple, Thorax continued. Survive for 10 minutes against all opponents and environmental hazards. Use any tactics you deem necessary. Zara adjusted her oversized helmet and nodded. Just to clarify, sir, any tactics necessary. There was something in her tone that made Vex 9's antennae twitch with concern. Within Academy safety protocols, yes. Understood. The arena's environmental systems activated with a low hum. Gravity fluctuated, artificial weather patterns began forming, and holographic obstacles materialized throughout the space. The 3 senior cadets took their positions, their combined experience and natural abilities representing a challenge that would test even veteran soldiers. Begin scenario, Thorax announced. The first surprise came within seconds. Instead of seeking cover or attempting to evade her opponents, Zara charged directly toward the center of the arena. Not toward any specific opponent, but toward the most dangerous section where all environmental hazards converged. Vash, the Cathari warrior, moved to intercept with the fluid grace of a natural predator. His claws extended, and he leapt toward the human with killing precision that had never failed him in training. He struck empty air. Zara had somehow anticipated his attack trajectory and moved aside at precisely the right moment. But she hadn't just dodged, she had positioned herself to use Vash's momentum against him. As the Cathari warrior sailed past, she grabbed his extended arm and redirected his motion straight into an environmental hazard field. The crackling energy barrier stunned Vash, leaving him temporarily paralyzed while his nervous system recovered from the shock. First opponent neutralized, someone whispered from the observation deck. 37 seconds. Mora, the Aquarian, activated her light-bending camouflage and vanished from visible spectrum. Her species had evolved this ability for hunting in the deep oceans of their homeworld, and it was nearly impossible to counter without specialized equipment. Zara stood perfectly still in the arena's center, her helmet turning slowly as she scanned the apparently empty space around her. To observers, she appeared to be looking for an invisible opponent with nothing but basic human senses. The attack came from above. Mora had climbed to an elevated position and dropped silently toward the human's exposed back, her bioluminescent weapon charged and ready to deliver a stunning blow. Without turning around, Zara stepped aside. Mora crashed into the arena floor where the human had been standing just moments before. How? Lieutenant Cora breathed from the observation deck. How did she know? But there was no time to analyze the implications. Thane, the 4-armed Zentaurian, had been circling for an opportunity to strike. His enhanced reflexes and multiple limbs made him perhaps the most dangerous close combat opponent in the academy. He attacked with a flurry of strikes that should have overwhelmed any defense. Zara moved like liquid mercury. 4 arms striking simultaneously meant nothing when she seemed to know where each attack would land before it began. She flowed around Thane's assault, occasionally redirecting one of his arms to block another, turning his greatest advantage into a liability. "This is impossible," Thorax muttered, his massive hands gripping the observation rail hard enough to leave finger impressions in the metal. She's fighting 3 opponents simultaneously and making it look effortless. But Zara wasn't just fighting 3 opponents. She was fighting 3 opponents while navigating environmental hazards that included variable gravity, energy barriers, artificial weather systems, and holographic obstacles that could cause very real injuries if contacted improperly. The environmental controls shifted, and suddenly half the arena was experiencing twice normal gravity, while the other half became effectively weightless. The 3 senior cadets, despite their training, struggled to adapt to the changing conditions. Zara adapted instantly. She used the gravity differential to her advantage, bouncing between zones with precise timing that suggested an intuitive understanding of physics that bordered on supernatural. When Vash recovered from the energy barrier and attempted another attack, she led him into the high-gravity zone where his own enhanced muscle mass became a disadvantage. When Mora tried to use her camouflage again, Zara somehow tracked her movement through the weightless zone by what? Sound? Air displacement? Heat signature detection with unaugmented human senses? "Commander," one of the Academy administrators said urgently, "we need to stop this scenario. The difficulty level is beyond what any cadet should face." Vex 9's compound eyes remained fixed on the arena. "She's not struggling. Look at her vital signs." The biometric displays showed Zara's heart rate elevated but stable, her breathing controlled, her stress indicators well within normal parameters. She was treating this like a moderately challenging workout rather than a life-threatening combat scenario. 8 minutes passed. Then 9. The 3 senior cadets were exhausted, their movements becoming sluggish as they struggled against both the human and the increasingly hostile environment. Zara, meanwhile, seemed to be gaining energy as the scenario progressed. At 9 minutes and 40 seconds, she did something that would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for years to come. Instead of simply surviving until the time limit, she went on the offensive. Moving with speed that defied tracking, she systematically neutralized all 3 opponents within 20 seconds. Not through overwhelming force or superior weapons, but through precise application of leverage, timing, and an understanding of biomechanics that suggested either advanced medical training or something far more concerning. Vash found himself pinned against a wall with his own arm twisted behind his back in a hold that was painful but caused no permanent damage. Mora was suspended upside down from an environmental fixture, her light bending suit disabled by some manipulation of its control systems that none of the observers could follow. Thane, the 4-armed warrior who had never been defeated in academy training, was flat on his back with Zara's small human hand pressed against his throat in a grip that somehow completely immobilized his superior strength. "Scenario complete," she announced calmly. "All hostiles neutralized with 0 casualties." The arena fell silent except for the hum of environmental systems shutting down. In the observation deck, hardened military instructors stared in stunned disbelief at what they had just witnessed. 10 minutes, 37 seconds, Thorax announced in a voice that sounded hollow. "New Academy record. All previous records significantly surpassed." Zara helped her 3 opponents to their feet, checking each for injuries with what appeared to be genuine medical knowledge. She offered water to Vash, adjusted Mora's equipment settings, and showed Thane a pressure point technique that she claimed would help with the muscle strain he had developed during the fight. "Thank you for the excellent training," she told them sincerely. "You're all incredibly skilled. I learned a lot." The 3 senior cadets who had entered the arena confident in their abilities to at least provide a challenging match for the human, left, looking like they had just encountered something beyond their understanding of normal reality. In the instructor's emergency meeting that followed, the tone was no longer curious or amused. It was deeply, fundamentally concerned. The combat analysis computers can't track her movement patterns, Lieutenant Cora reported, her scaled features pale with worry. The processing algorithms keep returning error messages. According to the sensor data, she's moving in ways that violate several laws of physics. The biometric readings are equally anomalous, Sil added, consulting her tablet with shaking hands. Her reaction times are measuring at levels that should be impossible for any carbon-based neural system. She's responding to attacks before the attackers have committed to them. Instructor Thorax, who had trained warriors from dozens of species over 3 decades, sat silent for several minutes before speaking. I've seen enhanced soldiers. I've trained genetically modified warriors, cybernetically augmented fighters, and species with natural abilities that border on supernatural. What that human did today. He paused, searching for words. That wasn't enhanced. That was something else entirely. Commander Vex 9 had been reviewing classified files on his personal terminal throughout the meeting. His antennae twitched as he found the information he had been seeking. According to intelligence reports, humans described their military training philosophy as preparing for the unexpected, he said slowly. Their combat doctrine emphasizes adaptability, improvisation, and what they call thinking outside the box. That doesn't explain superhuman physical capabilities, Cora protested. No, Vex 9 agreed. It doesn't. But there's something else in these files, or references to human conflicts, where ordinary soldiers accomplished things that their opponents considered impossible. Victories against superior numbers, successful operations under conditions that should have guaranteed failure, individual acts of combat effectiveness that defied logical analysis. He looked up from his terminal, his compound eyes reflecting the worry that was becoming endemic among the Academy staff. What if we've been fundamentally wrong about human limitations? What if what we consider impossible is simply normal for them? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The implications were staggering. If humans possessed capabilities far beyond what they had revealed to the galactic community, it changed everything about interspecies relations, military planning, and the balance of power that had maintained peace for centuries. We need to escalate this to the Galactic Defense Council, Sil said quietly. This is beyond Academy jurisdiction. Agreed, Vex 9 replied. But first we finish her evaluation. Tomorrow's final test is unrestricted combat against Academy instructors. The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Thorax said carefully, "Are you certain that's wise? If she's capable of what we witnessed today, then we need to know exactly what we're dealing with," Vex 9 finished. The galaxy's security may depend on it. That evening, in the Academy's restricted communications center, encrypted messages flashed across space toward the Galactic Defense Council headquarters. Military intelligence analysts would spend the next several hours reviewing combat footage and biometric data that challenged their fundamental understanding of human capabilities. In her quarters, Zara Holt sat reading a technical manual on advanced starship engineering, occasionally making notes in the margins with insights that suggested knowledge far beyond what any Academy cadet should possess. When asked by curious fellow cadets about her background, she had mentioned growing up on a farm and enjoying hiking. Somehow, that explanation was becoming less and less satisfactory. The final test was scheduled for dawn. Commander Vex 9 would personally enter the arena, along with Instructor Thorax and Lieutenant Cora. 3 experienced warriors with decades of combat training and natural abilities that had made them legends in their respective fields. Against one small human who had already rewritten every assumption about her species' limitations. As the artificial night settled over the Academy, nobody was sleeping well. The laughter that had greeted Zara Holt's arrival seemed like a memory from another lifetime. Tomorrow would provide answers to questions that were becoming more frightening with each passing hour. The human sat calmly in her quarters, apparently unconcerned by the mounting tension her presence had created. When the final test came, she would face it with the same casual confidence she had shown since arriving. That confidence, more than any of her demonstrated abilities, was perhaps the most unsettling thing of all, because it suggested that everything they had seen so far might just be the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were truly capable of, and nobody was prepared for that revelation.